just been listening to a documentary on the radio about Kierkegaard on the BBC programme In Our Time. And there's one or two things which I think are, well, which really resonate with me and some of the things I've been thinking about. The first thing that was mentioned was, and it was contested, but it wasn't mentioned, so I think it's fine, was this supposed division that Kierkegaard made in different ways of being, which were described as being an aesthetic, an ethical, and a religious. The aesthetic, and they were careful to contextualize that with what aesthetic meant in the early mid-19th century. The aesthetic was very much to do with, well, partly to do with hedonism, but also to do with a kind of detachment, a living within the body and acceptance of the pleasures of the body, but very much an acceptance, not a participation, not an outgoing, and not an involvement. And so, apparently, the aesthetic understanding within Kierkegaard is characterized by an avoidance of attachment in marriage or friendship or career, that kind of thing. The ethical stage, or the ethical way of being, was noted as, obviously as the name implies, to do with morality, to do with engagement of duties and responsibilities, and a cessation of that detachment in favour of an acceptance and a taking on of the existence of other people in the world and the society. And the third stage was this religious way of being. There was quite a few things said about religion, because obviously Kierkegaard was and a lot of his philosophy is Christian philosophy. But one of the things about this religious approach, which was just in this documentary at least, was just reported as being having a relationship to God, not too surprisingly. But God was described elsewhere in the documentary as the kind of third term, as they put it, the third term between the subject and the object, between the one person and another, between the I and the thou in Martin Buber's terms. So God is, in terms of sort of spatialization, which is the way I'm thinking about these things, God is the kind of intervening dynamic space across which these transactions take place and across which these duties and responsibilities and ethical engagement forge themselves. Okay. As part of that distinction between those three ways of being, there is a very clear very clear reference to the dimension of light. Aestheticism was associated, or the terms that were used extensively, which apparently Kierkegaard himself used, to do with aestheticism, was to do with low altitude, to being close to the ground, to being sort of downness really. Whereas ethical attitude, ethical way of being, was more elevated, and the religious way of being was seen as being more elevated still, perhaps supremely elevated. And again, I think what we're seeing there is this sort of correspondence, a sort of metaphorical correspondence between height and the extended vision that height offers, in which vision is understood as gaining access to knowledge, experiential knowledge, and also with value. And it's pretty much a staple of the topic of linguistics that we associate things that are higher with things that are higher value. Possibly you can talk about it without using that metaphor. So that's the first thing I'm getting out of this documentary, that Kierkegaard is providing kind of evidential support for this. This wind turbines can be really noisy on the video. If you're watching this, I do apologise. Kierkegaard just seems to be providing evidential support for this vertical dimension of being and knowledge, of knowing and being, and these things are very tightly welded in from Kierkegaard, with height associated with greater access to, greater engagement with, and probably greater reverence for the environment of knowledge, the space of knowledge itself. The other thing I got from this documentary, the documentary program on the radio, was pretty much indirect. Actually, I have to say that one of the things that focused on was this notion of becoming, and it was really cited in relation to not specifically Kierkegaard, although he provided the basis for it, more in relation to Nietzsche and to who else was it? Nietzsche, and Heidegger, who wrote extensively on becoming, and others, of course. But those are the two that were cited in this radio program. And that got me thinking about this term becoming. It's quite an odd word. But the origins of it must lie in the verb being and then coming, moving in the direction of where one is, moving in the direction of the source. So when one is becoming, it's not, in a sense, there's a claim that the movement implied in that, the growth or the development or the change, the transformation, the transmutation, any of those things which becoming sort of correlates with, the direction of movement in that is towards some kind of self that one identifies with, towards a location in which one feels oneself to be. Not really sure where I'm going with this, to be honest. I suppose I'm influenced by what they're saying in terms of Kierkegaard, about his understanding of God, this third term, his understanding of this religious way of being, which is a kind of totalizing, elevated viewpoint, the position of a higher power. And so becoming requires the becoming a Christian, which is what they talked about, but by extension, different sorts of becomingness. The becoming, I think, that's kind of configured there requires a bit of mental gymnastics in which one acknowledges the possibility of being, which is the isness, not the business, the isness, while simultaneously identifying with God in Kierkegaard's sense, the third term, and then being the act of coming towards that third term, identifying with becoming the hyphen that joins the I to the thou, or the ligature that binds in the original etymology of religion.